morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. My name is Jürgen Steinmetz, joining you from eTurbo News and the Breaking News Show from Honolulu, Hawaii. It's a cloudy day here. Actually, we have some thunderstorm warnings for tomorrow and tonight. It was pouring down rain last night. Now it's dry. It's kind of muggy today. But people at the beach, the shopping center I just came from, Ala Moana Mall, is busy. And not sure how it is in College Station, Texas, where my partner and colleague, Dr. Peter Tarlow, is waiting to speak.
We're doing great. It's a beautiful summer day here. Low temperatures in the 70s, high temperatures around 95. So if you like hot weather, this is the place to be. Low humidity, lots of blue skies. So I would call this pre-summer weather. When the summer actually gets going, it turns into more about 100 degrees. So if you are using the Celsius scale, we're kind of bouncing around 35 to 40 degrees Celsius right now. And that's warm. But
how is this compared to the temperature out of space? Because I think we're going to talk about tourism to out of space. It's quite hot, right? You have to go through a really hot area where you might burn to death before you get to space. And is it cold in space, or how is it up there?
Cold in space, yes. Though the closer you get to the sun, the hotter it is. So it's kind of like the equator. So if you're going toward the star, you're going to burn up. If you're going away from the star, you're probably going to freeze to death. But most in our own galaxy and solar system, the weather is pretty cold. Well below, well into the negative numbers. And of course, you don't have an atmosphere in space. And so that's going to change the whole world. When we do have space, and maybe that's a good place to begin to talk about, today, the United States government had the first hearings in 50 years. That's a long time, in 50 years, about UFOs. Unidentified flying objects. They have a new word for it. I forgot what the word is, but anyway, there were two parts of the sessions. One part of it was for public session, which we could all watch on television, and then they had a private session, which was closed doors. And so, of course, we don't know what was said in that one. But
well, maybe it had some real aliens participating. Yeah. They just didn't want to be identified yet.
We do know certain things. The world governments have confirmed that there are unidentified flying objects that are not made by human beings. Now, if they're from another planet, or if there's something that may be just a phenomena that we haven't quite figured out, we don't know yet. But we do know that there are definitely objects that break the laws of physics and are not made by Russians, by Chinese, by Americans, by French. So they're non-human made, which is actually kind of cool in the sense that it unites us all. We're always fighting among ourselves, but this is really a great concept. It shows us we all live on one very small little dot in the vastness of the universe. So there's really a theological and an ontological question that has to be looked at. The other side of that, of course, is that in the world of terrestrial tourism, space has always had an important area. In the United States, you have, for example, Cape Kennedy or Cape Canaveral, which is a major tourism attraction in Florida. I did work with Roswell, New Mexico, and that's the home of the little green men. In fact, I have in my study, they gave me a gift from Roswell of a little green man that I came home. And Roswell has all its streetlights are painted as little green men. And we had a big discussion many years ago if they should stay with the space theme or become an art center. And in reality, there are lots of art centers in the world, but there's only one place where you can really go for little green men. And so Roswell, New Mexico has really built its whole economy on alien space travel. So that is actually something that fascinates people. And who knows, maybe we're going to go from the mystical or the literary to the reality. I don't know if that'll be in our lifetime, and maybe in the lifetime of 3 or 4 generations hence. But it will be an interesting phenomenon to see as we break out of the Earth's atmosphere and go to new places. I do think we will be seeing in the next 100 years or so hotels established either floating in space or possibly on the moon. And
I hope you get a lot of frequent staying points and staying on the
Yes.
moon. You know?
a lot of frequent flyer points. I mean,
Absolutely. If this is
Well,
in miles, I mean, you probably can do free flying for the rest of your life on a round
Yeah,
trip to Mars or something, right?
well, it's 256,000 miles to the moon. So if you're doing 1K, you would have a 4K just on that one trip. But the other thing is we are discovering that there may be water in the moon below the crust. And so there's a lot of new opportunities. If there certainly are people planning on working on mining the moon because it's filled with minerals. And if they're able to get to those minerals, somebody's going to make a lot of money. And that means they're going to have to keep workers there. And they're going to need workers there. You already have tourism. So it may start off with business tourism and then move on to other forms of tourism. But I do think we're going to be seeing some form of more going on in space than we've ever thought before. And I think that's a really wonderful opportunity for the world to maybe it'll bring us together instead of clobbering each other. Maybe we have a common enemy, something like Martians, we will learn to work with each other and kind of realize we're all part of the same human family.
Well, I don't want to get into a fight with the Martian yet. You know, I think we have to study our friends and enemies first to see how this works. Yeah, I love the idea to have the little unknown green man walking around your neighborhood. Tell me when you see one, that's going to be quite interesting.
Yes, and we don't know if they'll be green. But if you do go to Rosdale, New Mexico, we do have, again, all the light posts have been painted as little green men. And at night you see faces on them. So it's created the real theme for at least one New Mexico town. And that's really helpful because in the end, they're able to take the theme and turn it into money. And, we laugh at it, but if you think about New England, you have, for example, if you go to New Bedford, Massachusetts, it's all based around the theme of Moby Dick. Well, Moby Dick is the national novel of the United States that nobody's read. It's awful to get through. It's painful to get through. It's about a whale that didn't exist and people going after him that didn't exist. And now you have the museums of Moby Dick. So that's called in tourism theory simulata. And interestingly enough, people pay a lot of money for simulata. So on the West Coast, on the East Coast of the United States, you have Moby Dick. If you go to London, you have everything based around Shakespeare. And of course, we saw the whole Harry Potter phenomena and how many people were going to England to go on visits to Harry Potter land. And again, that all comes out of the imagination of one woman who's an author. And she created a world where people even wanted to go to see train tracks for, I believe it was, if I'm not mistaken, track 9.5, but where you would walk through a mystical train track. And then think about something like Disneyland or Disneyland. They're also based in simulata. So I think the human mind likes things like that. And we've had this type of tourism forever. It's a very classical form of tourism where people look at a literary theme or a scientific theme or was 100 Leagues Under, James Verne, 1,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and he created the whole area, or Around the World in 80 Days in the balloon in the 19th century. So I think this is just part of the normal tourism world, and we're going to see a big takeoff once space tourism becomes a viable economic reality.
Yeah, when you read the report about the UFO meetings, the meeting you're talking about UFO sightings, It says two top military officials tasked with probing the sightings said that most can be ultimately identified. But they said the number of events have defied all attempts at explanation. I'm just not sure how you can translate this in saying it has been confirmed that there are unidentified
It depends
spacecraft.
upon which report. Where were you getting that from?
Well, this is the report from the BBC, what was published about 10 hours ago
Yeah.
about the U.S.
Yeah.
congressional
But
hearing.
if you listen to some of the reports coming from Congress, they were pretty much confirming that there are some unidentified flying objects that do not fit in within our patterns. And I was listening to the not reading a news report, but actually you can watch the hearings on television. And when questions were asked directly of the military people, they said, "Can you confirm that these were not done by human beings?" And the answer is no, these appear not to have been done by human beings.
I mean, one of the fascinating points
Of course, the
BBC,
BBC also, I think, have taken account, has had tremendous number of errors made, and it's not any longer a reliable source.
one of the explanations here in one of such incidents in 2004, a fighter pilot operating from an aircraft carrier in the Pacific encountered an object that seemed to have descended tens of thousands of feet before stopping and hovering. So there are things, and I can actually give you a story from my own experience. And this happened probably 35 or even more years ago when I still lived in Germany. And I lived in the United States now since 1984. But I know from before that my parents saw something. What they saw was a spacecraft coming out of the sky, literally stopped just about a few hundred meters above their home, and many people saw it, and then disappeared in the speed no one else saw. So they actually called 112, what's the 911 line in Europe, and about 3 days later, some people from a government agency came to my parents' house. They sat down for 4 hours with them and drilled them about the experience. And not only did they visit my parents, they visited neighbors and a lot of other things. So you can see the governments around the world are taking these things serious, and it's not something which just pops up today. This was, as I said, almost 40 years ago.
Right. There's two sides to that. That's the side of the science and the side of, we might call the literary concepts or the tourism. And we don't really know it yet. Now, the report you were speaking about from that 2004, was it?
2004, yes.
Yeah, that's a Nimitz report. And the pilot who made that report was just on television 20 minutes ago.
Right.
And he absolutely made it clear that he saw something that could not be identified as human made. Now, he didn't say what it was. And the real question was, is this a national security threat? And his argument was no, that while we don't know where it's coming from, on the other hand, it was not in any way being hostile or looking like it wanted to attack something. It may have been exploratory. But of course, that leads to the bigger question, is there life beyond Earth?
And I can tell you another story, and that's also a true story out of my own experience. A very good friend, and this was probably in the late 70s, early 80s, from Kansas City. And she was actually one of the first woman captains on a 747 working for TWA airline. And TWA, as you know, was based in St. Louis. And after takeoff on an international flight, and she was the captain of this plane, there also were what she was called chased or accompanied by something they could not identify. What actually forced them to land in Kansas City, what was an unscheduled landing, and nothing ever came out of this investigation. And the strange thing is, she was told, and her fellow co-pilot and engineer was told to never ever mention it. So whether this was a military operation, whether this was something what happened because of alien aircrafts, of course, we don't know. But these are phenomena, they are happening, and they have been happening for a long time.
Well, enough is happening that the Congress today had to have meetings about it. And while, of course, the real stuff And that's why, of course, the BBC report is so inaccurate, is because they're reporting on only the stuff that was let out to the public, but the real stuff was put in closed door sessions, and the BBC certainly was not there. So anything you read from the BBC or any news.
Yeah, but that's any news. I mean, BBC obviously won't be able to enter a closed session like
That's
any
right.
media, and it's up to speculation. I would hope that at some point the government would be more transparent and say, because should be public knowledge. I mean, we all
Yes,
should
I
know
agree
about
with
it.
you.
Are there aliens?
Yeah.
So
Now,
what's the big secret? It's not a war. It's just
first of all, the government should belong to us. We don't
Right,
belong to the government. The government belongs
absolutely.
to us.
Government
And
by the people and for the people. That's
and-
what it is, right?
And secondly, unless at some point you have to trust your population. So why most of the stuff was given in closed door sessions, we don't know. I wasn't there. I do know that I have to take any news report about these sessions with a grain of salt because the real stuff was given in closed door sessions. But what we can figure out theoretically is if the government took the time to have the sessions and to have closed door sessions, that means there has to be something there. Because if there was nothing there, they would have just made everything open. And the fact that they didn't make everything open, then I think you can read backwards and you can question why was there nothing there.
And that, of course, opens up the entire spectrum to speculations,
Sure.
to rumors, to false assumptions. And so I would definitely agree with you. The government should be transparent. There should be public knowledge. What is there to hide? It's not like I understand that the government doesn't want to give military secrets out, what could maybe help the Russians in the Ukrainian situations or similar situations. But this is different. This is not a war. This is just scientific information. I think everyone should have equal access to.
Well, right now, we do know that there's two sets of information, public and private. On another topic, which is kind of back down to earth, one of the things we're seeing is more and more people are traveling without cash. And in some places, some countries like Finland have already moved to a cashless society. Well, that's, in many ways, is very good because it's less chance of being robbed, et cetera, et cetera. On the other hand, one of the things we're noticing is that people have stopped giving tips. Or many people, because they don't have any cash. You know, where before they might give at a hotel, leave $4 or $5 or whatever. Very often now, people, especially younger generation people, may be not used to tipping, or they don't have the cash to give it. Or I know sometimes when I'm coming back to the United States, I only have foreign currency in my pocket. And, you know, I can't give my cab driver a tip with 22 pesos for some country. I mean, you know, it's worthless. So I'm wondering if the tourism industry has to consider new probabilities. The whole idea of tipping was one for special services, but now, of course, waiters and hotel people depend on those tips. It's really an extra charge that the owners are not taking responsibility for. They're paying less so that they assume you're going to get tips. And now people can't get tips because they don't have a tip on a credit card.
Well, I disagree with you on most parts. I think it actually, I can give you my own experience here also where it actually works the other way around. I just came from my favorite coffee shop here, Honolulu Coffee in Ala Moana Shopping Center. And I don't take cash. And so I pay everything on credit card or on Apple Pay. And when you do this payment, no matter where you go, there is an option for a tip. So you really want to look into someone's face who's behind the cash register and click on and tip and select no tip. But not only that, you buy a $3 cup of coffee, $3.30 cup of coffee, and the minimum tip on the credit card machine is $1. What is 30% tip? What is a lot? And so these guys must be very happy because now, since no one has cash, and no one wants to face someone and say, I don't give you a tip, it's actually a price increase. But I agree with you, if someone carries your bags up to your room in a hotel, you don't really ask that person if you can take a credit card. And that is definitely an issue. So it works both ways.
We are also seeing the studies are starting to show that younger people are not giving a tip, and they have no problem buying that cup of coffee and not putting a tip on. And partly, um, it seems to me this is comes down to an ethical question, because when you hire a waiter, and you're basically referring to waiters or people in the food service industry, uh, they're told, well, we're going to give you less money, maybe $2 an hour, $3 an hour, $4 an hour, whatever it happens to be, because you're going to get tips. Now, first of all, they want the tips because they stick them in their pocket and they don't want to pay taxes on them. So right away there, and that's by the way illegal, because if you do receive a tip, you're supposed to pay taxes on it. Uh, I don't think anybody does, but that's what you're supposed to do. But secondly, I'm seeing more and more, and of course, I live in a college town. You're a little bit older, but if you're talking about people in their 20s or 18s, many of these people just don't leave a tip at all, and they just sign their credit card, and that's it. So I'm really wondering if maybe the whole tourism industry needs to think this through, really explore what is hearsay evidence and what is real evidence, and we don't know that. And then begin to say, maybe we need to move to a tipless society where service charges are either included, or we just say that a waiter or a waitress or someone working in a hotel gets a decent salary and doesn't have to become tip dependent. And on some level, it seems to me a tip is almost insulting. It's kind of, you're buying the product for $10 in a restaurant, and then you're supposed to add, it's really $12, but we're not going to tell you it's $12. It's really $10. Maybe we ought to just say it's $12 and then be done with it.
I mean, there are even other surcharges. I went to a restaurant the other day, and there was a special surcharge because of fuel increase in a restaurant, or inflation surcharge, or whatever it was. But Peter, the tipping is really depending on where you are in the world. In the United States, tipping, I agree, is kind of customary. So people do give a tip in restaurants. And I also know from friends who are working in the hospitality industry and who are waiters complaining that sometimes they get less tips, and they are required to automatically pay taxes, and it's deducted from their paycheck of an assumption that they got 15% or 18%, whatever it is, tip. So if they get less, they have to put money on top of it, at least for the tax part. So it's not really true that they don't have to pay taxes. In some cases it may be, but not in regular restaurants.
Well,
Now,
then that makes it again even more difficult. And one of the things I'm suggesting is maybe we ought to abolish tipping and just have it as a normal fee. The
yeah,
other part of that is also, if I'm traveling, I can take 50% of the cost of my food as a tax deductible if I'm working, but I can't take the tip as tax deductible. So if I were paying $12 instead of $10 plus 2, then I would be taking a tax deduction of $6 instead of $5. So it's costing me on both ends.
and Peter, we're not just talking now about the United States. Since we have
Right.
listeners all over the place, many may not even know that in the United States, tipping is not something you just pay for good service. It's something you just pay. And
Right.
so if you compare it, for example, with most countries in Europe, um, where I grew up in Germany, yes, you tip, but very little. If your bill is 14 euro and 80 cents, you give 15 if you pay cash. If you
Yes.
pay on a credit card, there is not even an option for tip. So you
Right.
pay 14.80. That's it. And no one question this. No one say, "Oh, where's my tip?" Because waiters and waiters are getting a regular salary. They get
And I
paid for
like
their
that
job.
idea very
And
much.
well, and you can like it on one hand, but on the other hand, you may not get the smile, and you may not get all these things around the service. They just give you your food and that's it, because it doesn't make any difference how nice or how
But as
not nice they are. They're going to get a tip, or they're going to get paid.
yes.
So it works both ways.
Well, but I think the number one complaint in the United States, or places which are high tipping societies such as Turkey, the United States, the Caribbean, is you get lousy customer service and you're expected to pay the tip. And so you're being hit both ways. Customer service around the United States, in the Caribbean, and places like Turkey has gone down. It has not gone up. Tipping has not increased customer service. It's become an expectation. And really wonder if this is not a major discussion. Something like the World Tourism Network ought to have a discussion, a group talking about what is tipping good, is tipping bad, is tipping counterproductive, is tipping productive. Yes, the theory was that you give a little bit of extra at your will for something which is going to be excellent service. On the other hand, I will tell you, I'm in the Caribbean all the time. Very often you get terrible customer service in the Caribbean, as by the way you do in Hawaii. On the other hand, when I go to an all-inclusive, I get great customer service and there's no tips. So it breaks the theory.
Yeah, Peter, if you look at Las Vegas, for example, when you go to some of the buffet restaurants, not all of them, but many of them, when you have to prepay and also you have to select a tip. You can do 15, 20, 25%. You haven't even entered the restaurant. You don't know who's going to serve
Well,
you.
then how are you
How
going to get
would
good
you know how great your service is or how bad your service is?
Right.
And then there are other restaurants at Miami Beach, for example, South Beach. You go into a restaurant, you pay, a tip is included, but they don't tell you because there's another line on the slip where you then add another tip, and you probably overlooked, like most people, that you already charged 18%. So
Yes.
then you add another 18%, that means you're paying a 36% tip.
That's right.
So tip is really something what needs to be redone.
Thought through. In other words, I know that when I'm in the Caribbean, very often they charge 18% service charge, which means simply a tip. And then they give me the bill and then they put under that extra tip. So people pay basically 36% tip or 40% tip. That's an insane amount of money. And on top of that, one of the things I'm constantly teaching in the Caribbean is good customer service. Just getting a waiter or waitress not to throw the food at you or to smile is already a major success in lots of the Caribbean. In fact, when you do studies in the Caribbean, one of the number one complaints is lousy customer service. So you're paying very expensive tips. You're not getting customer service, or in the case you mentioned Hawaii in Las Vegas, you're pre-tipping. Well, how can you? Well, that's insanity. You know, it's like
it is.
And
It is. I mean, there's another coffee shop I go to. Also, you pay upfront and you select the tip, and it starts with $1. So again, if you only have a $3 cup of coffee, it's a 30% minimum expectation. And then after this, you have to stand in line and actually pick up your own coffee. No one brings it to you.
So what is the
So
tip?
what's the tip for? You don't know. Maybe things are better in Japan, because in Japan, I experienced you get a smile, you get really, really great customer service. And if you try to give a tip, they get upset because
Right.
they wouldn't take your tip, no matter
So
what.
you know what? We're
Doesn't
now
matter.
learning again. The tip may be counterproductive. And on top of that, it's a way for people not to pay decent wages. And instead, it's a pass along to the customer as an extra. In other words, not only am I paying for the food, not only am I paying for the preparation of the food, not only am I paying for the table, which I, by the way, push through as quickly as possible so they can turn the table over 3 or 4 times, but then I'm expecting to pay on top of that a pass-through cost, which is the cost and the tip is really just a surcharge. So I think this is a really important topic. We're just really touching right now the beginnings of it. But I would really encourage tourism organizations such as our own World Tourism Network to really begin to think about this stuff and to develop some sort of policies. And I think people walk around completely confused on what should they do or not do. On top of that, most visitors don't know when they're going from country to country what the local customs are.
Yeah,
And so
that's definitely, it's a local issue. Even within our own country, you have different areas where it's handled differently, and it's very confusing. I agree with you, Peter. And now for everyone who wants to give us a tip, any amount of tip is fine. You go to eTurboNews.com/payments, and Peter and I, we can go out and have a party.
yes. And if you don't want to give us a money tip, give us a tip about an idea, because the tip can also mean tell us something you would like to discuss. This discussion about tips came because someone from the East Coast of the United States, from Maryland, called me and said, I'd really like if you guys would talk about tips. So if any of our listeners have other topics they would like us to touch upon, I think that would be great because that makes this also more interactive. And I think it's important for us to discuss hot topics that other people want to hear about. So
And all you need to do is click on contact on any of our websites and just let us know what you wanted to cover, what you think we should cover. If you have something you want to be a guest on our show, also let us know. It's all on our contact form, very easy, and we'll definitely consider and get back to you. Well, Peter, I think this was an interesting from the green man to how to avoid tips and
notice that
it was an interesting
we
session.
talked about little green men, and of course, in American English, green also represents money. So really,
And nature, Peter, and nature.
yes, and nature, but certainly in classical American slang, you know, a greenback and the whole concept of green has always represented money. So maybe the little green men are really small tips. Who knows?
Who knows? Well, I hope you enjoyed our session today.
Thank you.
If you wanted to listen to it again, just wait for maybe another hour or so. It's going to repeat, or easier, just go to our website, breakingnewsshow.com, and you can find all our various events and listen to it all day. Of course, you can also visit our YouTube channel, youtube.com/travel news group, or click on the links we provide on every website. Peter, I talk to you very soon again, and you enjoy your afternoon or evening in College
It's night
Station.
here. It's dark at night in Texas, but tomorrow will dawn. And by the way, tomorrow is in much of the United States Police Memorial Day, and so just a shout out to all the people who work so hard to try to keep us safe, and I believe over 600 police officers in the United States lost their life in the last year.
Yeah,
So
that's something I think we should really be aware of, because if a police officer shoots someone, what is very tragic, and sometimes it's criminal, but it doesn't happen so often. But how many police officers give up their life to protect us, the
that's
public?
right.
And we should really not forget this, because it gets a lot less publicity, and it should get more. So it's definitely
So if you
good that
see
we have this day
tomorrow
tomorrow.
a police officer you're going by, take a moment and thank him also or her also for his or her service, because they sacrifice a lot to keep us safe. Okay.
All right. Well, aloha and good night.
Bye-bye.
And we talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.